So President Biden has answered this hypothetical question on multiple occasions, as you say. He has also, on multiple occasions, including in the very same breath, said that our policy towards cross-strait relations towards China and Taiwan has not changed, that it is rooted in the One China policy, the 3 joint communiques, the Taiwan Relations Act. That remains the fundamental foundation of our policy. The president himself has said that. He said it directly to Xi Jinping.
But there's a contradiction here.
Well, first of all, the entire Taiwan policy of the United States is built on a series of internal tensions.
That's a really odd way to put it. That's Jake Sullivan. He's having a very hard time explaining why the president, who has said that the U.S. would in fact send troops to Taiwan in the event of any kind of Chinese invasion, why that doesn't represent a change in official policy. I don't think he did a very good job of explaining that. And to that point, he also hasn't done a very good job either when he was explaining, no, we're not looking to decouple our economy from China. This banner people that they have over at NSA. Joining us right now on this, Stephen Yates and others. Stephen Yates at YatesComs on Twitter, senior fellow at the America First Policy Institute, and he's also the chair of the China Policy Initiative. Stephen, always good to see you. Over the weekend, really astonishing moment. A Chinese warship cutting off a United States destroyer in the Taiwan Strait as the U.S. and Canada were doing drills. It was 150 yards away. And China they went all the way over there and accused the United States of being the one to provoke them. I just wanted to get your thoughts on this because that seems like that's a pretty big escalation. I don't know why they would want to mess with that particular destroyer because apparently it's packed. I was reading this list of all kinds of air-to-surface missiles, everything.
Well, this is the country that had a jet fighter crash deliberately into a lumbering EP-3 surveillance vehicle way back in 2001. So they are totally within the realm of their comfort zone to fly way out of their way to engage in a conflict. So this was obviously a deliberate act. They are, I think, being much, much more aggressive now than they have been in recent years about trying to deny a principle that's governed international relations for centuries, which is freedom of navigation on the high seas. And basically, the most powerful nations on the planet have, among all their other disagreements, protected that fundamental right. And it's China that is most revisionist about this. And it's the West, as people like to refer to it, with those, I think, crumbling powers of Europe walking away from these principles. But really, China sees weakness and they're pushing. So, yeah, they're establishing that the Taiwan Strait is their waters. It's not international waters, even though it's 100 miles of choppy seas that separate an island from a continent. But you would like to believe that Japan, Australia, and those Europeans might wake up and say, hey, wait a minute, this is an international principle that's being challenged.
Yeah, exactly. And while apparently we're looking at the 34th anniversary of Tiananmen Square, there were 2 officials that arrived in Beijing to try to thaw relations, which I want to get into that, but why do we have to go to them to try to thaw relations? This comes after last week revelations that a CIA, someone with the CIA was trying to do the same thing in the Biden administration. It should be the opposite, but we seem to be doing all of the legwork to try to quell these tensions.
Well, it's also people who are trying to recreate the cloak and dagger mystery of Henry Kissinger's outreach to China during the Cultural Revolution there in the height of the Cold War. They think this makes them brave advocates of engagement in diplomacy. It's very high-minded of them to operate in secret and to be an ardent suitor of an adversary that poisons us with viruses and steals from us on intellectual property, and likes to fly its planes into ours and run its ship up close to ours and all that fun stuff. But these guys can jet set around and sit down around a table and beg them to come back to talks. It's obviously not a good look. It makes America look weak, and it emboldens the Chinese government to push even further. There's no evidence that these efforts at appeasement have made the situation better. None.
Yeah. And this comes, Politico reported that China's new defense chief apparently ghosted the U.S., but met with Europeans. Their Chinese defense minister, he refused to go beyond a handshake with Lloyd Austin, his counterpart in the U.S. It just makes us, especially with a country where image means a lot. I mean, you have to understand your foe before you can deal with them. And it just doesn't seem like they're taking that into consideration, because they put themselves out there and China just gets an opportunity to, for the lack of a better way to put it, to stunt on it. I mean, that's just really what it is.
Well, I mean, anybody that spent 5 minutes studying the Chinese Communist Party should know that they are masters, in their own definition, of messing with your mind and messing with your words. And if they get you speaking from their song sheet, then they've already started to control your mind and your policy. And there's too many Americans who've fallen along with this. That clip of the White House saying what we're talking about, the one China policy, and going back to the canonical texts of 3 joint communiques. How many Americans ever voted to elect someone to uphold communiques? I mean, it's a French word, for God's sake. So this is not what Americans are about. We should be about an American policy with American interests, and we make no apology for it. And if we need to engage, we should engage, but we don't need to beg. And so, I mean, everything about this is wrong. And so, to have on top of it, these guys showing up on the anniversary of June 4th, you want to call yourselves experts on Asia and dealing with China, you show up on a date that they've tried to memory hole from their own people, and you're just going about business as usual. What weaker sign could you send about the importance of freedom and democracy in U.S.-China relations?
That's a great point. We're talking with our good friend Stephen Yates. Last question for you here. Jake Sullivan's interview we played a clip from earlier. He also said in that same interview that we are not looking to decouple our economy from China. So that tells me that status quo is going to stay the same and nothing's changing with this administration.
Yeah, that whole business ticks me off to no end. These
We're so
games
happy
that
to get
they
you wound
play-
up on a Monday.
These games they play, but it's almost as if the whole conspiracy got together and they set up on their jets to go and bow to the emperor in Beijing. And everyone wants to bring business back. We got Jamie Dimon over there talking about getting things back to normal. We have the White House talking about a thaw. We have the National Security Council and the State Department going and preparing for a possible meeting. I mean, this is appeasement and engagement coming back in full swing at a time when what is America going to get out of this? We may avoid a conflict by just giving up American interests in East Asia, or giving up the American interest in cybersecurity and clean technology and things like that. But I think it's a huge mistake. But it's just peeving beyond belief, these guys to play around with these silly word games as if, de-risking. Isn't even a word for that in Chinese. So I don't know what they think they're trying to communicate or what they think they're going to get the Chinese to buy into. But the Chinese leadership is here for the risk right now. They're eating it up, and they're eating our lunch. And I wish we had real men ready to stand up against it.
Amen to that. Stephen Yates at YatesComs on Twitter. I wish we did too. I mean, changing it up. I mean, we'll see. We'll see what happens in 2024. At YatesComs on Twitter. Stephen, always appreciate the time. Thank you, my friend. Good to see you.
Thank you, Dana. Take care.
You too.